Hi, everyone. My name is Emmy Amarati, and I'm Assistant Director of our ACU Online Writing Center. During tonight's webinar, we'll be discussing how to create the easy-to-read list to make it easier to communicate complex information with an audience. Keep in mind that tomorrow we'll send out links to the recording and the slide deck for the webinar, and the links to the resources in the slide deck will be active. The slide deck will also include a formatting checklist that we'll go through at the end of the webinar, so it may be a handy future resource. During the presentation, please feel free to type any questions into the chat and we will pause as needed to go through them the best we can. So the learning objectives for tonight's webinar are to differentiate among the 4 types of lists in APA style. Who knew there were so many? Apply best practices to format bulleted lists in APA style, and workshop NUTR 627, Week 7, Assignment 1, the summary of recommendations. Our first learning objective is to differentiate among the 4 types of lists in APA style. So, in general, why do we have lists? Lists help readers understand a related set of points in a sentence or a paragraph, and there are 4 types of lists in APA format. There are simple lists, lettered lists, meaning those labeled with A, B, C, numbered lists labeled 1, 2, 3, and bulleted lists, which we have on this page actually with bullets. APA provides a lot of guidelines regarding how to punctuate and structure each type of list, and they also provide guidelines regarding what each type of list is used for. So we're going to go through all of that tonight. And there are a lot of guidelines involved in the different types of lists, but the purpose of those guidelines is actually to allow you to make choices that will best serve your presentation of the information you want to share with your audience. These choices relate to the type of list, the grammatical form of the list items, and even the way you punctuate the list items. So we may view APA's guidelines as limiting sometimes because we have to figure out how to do what they want us to do in each type of list. But in reality, it's actually providing us with a lot of different choices that we can make to best present our information. And if you would like to see the APA's guidelines in their own words, you can look at page 189 through 190 of the 7th edition manual, or you can click this link to the APA website. It's their page on lists. So first of all, let's talk about a simple list. A simple list is just a list of ideas that forms a part of a sentence. For instance, here's one. Macronutrients include carbohydrates, fats, and protein. Here, the words carbohydrates, fats, and protein form the simple list. Notice that we have commas between all the list items, including before the last one, and protein. This comma before the final list item is what we call a serial or Oxford comma, and it is required in APA format. It helps the reader see when you get to the end of the first part of the list and signals, hey, we're coming to the last item. If you have a more complex list in which the items already contain commas, then you can separate those items with semicolons. So in this second example that I just pulled up, we have a list of verb phrases. Consider their intake of carbohydrates, fats, and protein, semicolon, monitor blood sugar levels, semicolon, and engage in healthy habits like exercise, stress management, and not smoking. The reason we have semicolons between the 3 list items here, the verb and object sets, is to help the reader understand where each one begins and where each one ends. You can see that the first set already has commas between carbohydrates, comma, fats, comma, and protein. And the last set also has commas in it already as well between exercise, comma, stress management, comma, and not smoking. So because we already have commas there, it could be confusing for the reader to try to figure out what are the actual 3 big points that we're listing here. So that's why we use a semicolon, which has a bit of a stronger pause to show where those list items end and the next one begins. And notice that as with the serial comma earlier, we have a semicolon before the last and or the third item. One thing we want to make sure that we do when we create a list is to present the items in parallel structure. Parallel structure means that the list items will have the same grammatical form. So, for example, as in that first simple list, all the items might be nouns, carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. They're all nouns. In our second list, these are all phrases that begin with verbs and they have objects. So, um, individuals with diabetes must what? They must consider their intake of these things, monitor their blood sugar levels, and then engage in healthy habits like blah, blah, blah. So all three of those items in the list begin with verbs, and that means that they also have the same grammatical structure. The second type of list in APA format is a lettered list. A lettered list is similar to a simple list or a complex list, rather, but the letters are inserted between the items in the linear sentence to draw more attention to and help readers understand the separate parallel items listed. You in APA, you use lowercase letters in parentheses before each item. That means you put parentheses before the lowercase a and after it. You don't just put it on one side. And in APA, we never put numbers in parentheses to designate a list. In a numbered list, we will use a different sort of formatting. So here's our example of a lettered list. Individuals who participated in the study were asked to A, record their daily intake of carbohydrates, fats, and protein, B, record blood sugar levels on a prescribed schedule, and C, participate in daily journaling activities. So you can see that our first item already had commas in it because we had carbohydrates, comma, fats, comma, and protein. Therefore, I went ahead and I used those stronger semicolons to separate the items in the list, even though I also already have the A, the B, and the C. But what the A, the B, and the C do is kind of help your reader really hone in on what the three things they ask the participants to do, what those three things are. So it's just kind of a way to give more emphasis while still listing items in a linear part of a sentence. The next type of list in APA is a numbered list, and APA does have specific guidelines for when you use a numbered list. You use a numbered list only when you want to display items in a series. So for instance, chronology, first this happened, then this happened, or steps in a procedure. Step one is this, step two is this. When you create a numbered list, you should create it using the numbering function in Word or your word processing program. This will automatically indent the list and it will make sure that you retain double spacing as APA requires. Each of the numbers should be an Arabic numeral. So that's just the way we normally write number 1, 2, 3 when we're doing math or whatever. And you'll follow each one with a period. Again, you don't use a parenthesis. And the items in a numbered list must be complete sentences or paragraphs. You cannot follow a number in a numbered list with anything that is not a complete sentence or multiple complete sentences. So here's an example of a numbered list. Sampson 2019 translated the STEPS approach, a 5-criteria method for evaluating pharmacotherapy options for type 2 diabetes, into a series of questions. And then I have each question listed. So again, we have the numeral followed by a period. Because the numbered list items are complete sentences, you begin each item with a capital letter. So the H in all of these numbered items is capitalized. And you'll finish it with a period or other appropriate end punctuation. In this case, I have a list of questions, so I wouldn't end them with a period. I'd end them with question marks. Now, the last type of list is a bulleted list, and that's going to be the focus of most of our discussion tonight. For a bulleted list, you use it when you want to draw visual attention to related items without implying that the items go in a certain order. So you don't want to show that they are in chronological order, or you don't want to say that one is more important than the other. You just want to share a list of equally weighted concepts or ideas with the reader. You will create your bulleted list again using the bullets function in Word, which will automatically indent the list for you and keep it double spaced. In APA, your bullets may consist of small circles, dashes, or squares, and the items in the list may be complete sentences or words or phrases. Like all other lists, the items in a bulleted list should reflect parallel structure. So, again, we're talking about choices. It says bullets may consist. They can be circles, dashes, or squares. You get to pick. You can pick if you want your bullets to be complete sentences or words or phrases, or even a combination of those things, which we will look toward or look at examples of in a little while. Um, so again, the formatting of bulleted lists or those options, it truly offers just loads of choices that can help you present your material in the most accessible way for your reader. With that in mind, our next learning objective is to look at these options as we consider best practices to format bulleted lists in APA style. So our best practice one is to apply parallel structure. We're going to talk in detail about parallel structure, even though we mentioned it a little while ago, because given all the options we have for formatting a bulleted list, we just want to make sure we understand what each option actually means or what it would look like. So each item in a bulleted list will have the same grammatical structure. They can be all complete sentences. They can be all words or phrases of the same type. That means you could have all verb phrases, all gerund phrases, which we'll explain more in a minute, or all noun phrases. You could also have all words plus phrases or sentences. For instance, you could have a list of definitions where the word is followed by a sentence fragment or a complete sentence, or both actually, to define or further describe it. Using parallel structure not only makes the list easier to read, but it will also give each point in the list equal weight so the reader doesn't overly focus on one point or another. For instance, envision if one bullet point in a list consisted of just one word, and then the next one consisted of a whole complete sentence of a couple of lines. The reader would be more likely to focus on that sentence, even if that one word bullet were really quite important. So we're going to look at an example that is not parallel structure first. Individuals with kidney disease should apply the following dietary recommendations. Limit sodium to less than 2,300 milligrams per day, restricting phosphorus to less than 800 to 1,000 milligrams per day, depending on kidney function, 6/10 to 8/10 of a gram of protein per kilogram of body weight for stages 4 through 5 kidney disease. You can see that these three bullets are not structured the same way, which actually made it very awkward even for me to read out loud. Um, so the first item here, limit sodium, is a verb plus an object. We can also consider this to be a command sentence. For instance, what should you do? Limit sodium to less than 2,300 milligrams per day. The second item is that gerund idea that we talked about a little while ago. So restricting. A gerund is a noun formed by adding ing to a verb. So here the verb is restrict, but we add an ing to it and it becomes restricting. Restricting what? Restricting phosphorus. So this is actually a gerund phrase. And then the last one is just a noun phrase, which is the noun protein with a bunch of modifiers to explain the idea about the protein. Um, because that is just so awkward to read and it makes it really hard for the reader to focus as you're switching among all these different forms, let's look at three different ways we can make it parallel. Because you can use verbs, gerunds, or noun phrases. You just need to make sure that you use all of them or make all of them have that form. So here's what it would look like if you wanted to do verbs or command sentences in this case. Individuals with disease should apply the following dietary recommendations. Limit sodium to less than 2,300 milligrams per day. Restrict phosphorus to less than 800 to 1,000 milligrams per day, depending on kidney function. Consume 6 to 8 tenths of a gram of protein per kilogram body weight for stages 4 through 5 kidney disease. In this case, it was much easier for me to read. Each idea was a complete command type sentence on its own that begins with a verb, and therefore all those bullets are parallel. Let's look at the gerund option. I switched the opening sentence up a little bit here to have it make more sense. Dietary best practices for individuals with kidney disease include what? Limiting sodium to less than 2,300 milligrams per day, restricting phosphorus to less than 800 to 1,000 milligrams per day, depending on kidney function. Consuming 6 to 8 tenths of a gram of protein per kilogram body weight for stages 4 through 5 kidney disease. Again, that one's much easier to read, and limiting, restricting, and consuming all carry the same kind of visual weight in that sentence. Last, we can also rewrite this as all noun phrases. Individuals with kidney disease should consume. Consume what? Less than 2,300 milligrams sodium per day, less than 800 to 1,000 milligrams phosphorus per day, depending on kidney function, 6 to 8 tenths of a gram protein per kilogram body weight for stages 4 through 5 kidney disease. Again, these are all noun phrases. Sodium, phosphorus, and protein with modifiers explaining how much they should consume and when. Before we move on from this slide, let's look at one more thing. You may have noticed that in the past couple of slides, actually, I had one sentence introducing the list that was followed by a colon here on the left, and I had another one that was not followed by a colon here on the right. Both of these options are actually appropriate when formatting lists or introducing lists in APA style, so let's clarify when each one is used. So if the idea that introduces your list is a complete sentence, you put a colon between your idea and the list. Individuals with kidney disease should apply the following dietary recommendations. That would be a sentence by itself. If it weren't followed with a list, I would put a period after it. So that means I'm going to put a colon after it to precede my list. Now, to colon or not to colon. We do not colon if the idea that introduces the list is a sentence fragment. In other words, if the list item is necessary to grammatically complete your idea, you do not put a colon after it. So as I was reading earlier, I was saying individuals with kidney disease should consume what? See, it's not a complete idea. It's not telling us what they should consume in that group of words at the top. Because we actually need to read the bullet to complete the idea, we are not going to put a colon before the list. So next, our best practice number 2 is choosing appropriate punctuation. Punctuation in a bulleted list will vary based on whether the bulleted list items consist of complete sentences, words or phrases, or words plus sentence fragments or sentences, or sentences, I should say. So we're going to go through and we're going to look at how you would punctuate in each of these situations. So if your list items consist of complete sentences, as in this example here, you will begin each item with a capital letter and you will finish it with a period or other appropriate end punctuation. We'll read part of this to see. In a systematic review, Craddock et al. Found that several factors impacted the ability of individuals with diabetes to control their hemoglobin A1C levels in the context of randomized controlled trials. Participants may have had underlying biological factors affecting obesity or appetite regulation. Participants may have attempted to change multiple diabetes-related behaviors instead of focusing on one at a time. And the last two are also complete sentences, but you can see that each one starts with a complete capital letter, excuse me, and ends with a period, because those are complete ideas in and of themselves. Now, for if your bullets consist of words or short phrases, we have this option. If they are simple words or phrases, you begin each item with a lowercase letter, unless it's a proper noun, of course, and you can use no punctuation at all at the end of each item. So let's look at that in this example. Individuals may struggle to apply diabetes-related interventions for various reasons. Colon, because that's a complete sentence. Level of self-discipline, lack of knowledge regarding healthy eating habits, daily stress, impact of family members, inability to manage the social significance of food. In this case, each of my phrases is short. It's on one line, or it's even just a couple of words. And in this case, APA says I don't need to put any punctuation after them. They can just sit on their own. The other option we have when writing a list that consists of words or phrases is to punctuate the list as though the bullets weren't there at all. So let's look at an example of this with a more complex list. Individuals with diabetes described their barriers to achieving healthy dietary practice within the context of four themes. Addiction, in which they compared their relationship with food to addiction to drugs or alcohol, semicolon. Cheating, comma, in which they viewed eating unhealthy foods as weakness, semicolon. Emotions, comma, in which they described food as a source of comfort when faced with negative feelings, semicolon. And unwillingness to change, in which they stated a disregard for clinicians' advice. In this case, I have a comma after each word, although I forgot to mention the comma after addiction when I was reading through the first time. Sorry. And these are complex phrases. So if I had written them in a sentence, um, I would have used a comma after each single word or the theme. The last theme is three words. And then between the themes overall, I would have put those semicolons. And here's what that would look like if we put it all in one linear sentence. Um, In the sentence, I have semicolons between the list items because they already contained commas. However, if you compare this slide with the linear sentence to the previous slide with the list, which one seemed more visually accessible? It was definitely the bulleted list, which made it easier for us to understand what the themes were and what they meant in the author's interpretation. And this is why APA allows us the option to present very important or complex information in this manner if we so choose. Obviously, we don't want an entire paper in most cases to consist of a list, but to highlight some very important ideas that might otherwise be confusing, lists are really helpful. So our next, oops, hold on, I lost my screen share. There we go, I'm back. So our next example is what if we want our bullets to consist of both a word and a sentence fragment? In this case, here's the example first. The three macronutrients include, this time I don't have a colon because I need those words, carbohydrates, fats, and protein to finish my sentence. The three macronutrients include carbohydrates, the source of glucose, which provides energy for all life processes. Fats, the source of essential fatty acids, which act as energy stores and protect cell membranes. Protein, the source of essential amino acids, which help build and repair the body. So in this case, I have a keyword, carbohydrates, fats, and protein at the head of each bullet. If I want to do this and then just define or describe the word or phrase, I can begin that word or phrase with a lowercase letter, and then I will follow it with a colon. That's allowed per APA guidelines. If the definition or description is a sentence fragment, then we begin that definition or description with a lowercase letter. So for instance, I have carbohydrates starting with a lowercase c, and then I have the source of glucose headed with a lowercase t. Um, I don't have to follow the fragment with a period according to APA guidelines. Or I can follow the fragment with a period according to APA guidelines. This is another one of those choices that they allow us to make. Um, if you structure a bulleted list like this with a word plus a sentence fragment, you can use a period or not, but whichever punctuation option you choose, just make sure that you apply it consistently. So if I had left out the period after membranes in bullet 2 here, that would have been a little weird. I just need to make sure that I do it the same way every time. Here is how you will format the list if you have a word followed by a complete sentence. So if we want to define or describe a word here, we again begin it with a lowercase letter. The three macronutrients include carbohydrates, fats, protein. Those all begin with lowercase letters. I've followed them with colons, which again, APA says is an acceptable way to do this. Then, because my definitions and descriptions are complete sentences, I have begun those with capital letters and followed them with appropriate end punctuation. In this case, that's a period for all three. So the three macronutrients include carbohydrates, colon. The body breaks carbohydrates down into glucose, which provides energy for all life processes, period. And again, I've made sure to capitalize all three of those sentences and to put periods after all three of those sentences for consistency. Now here's where we get really fancy. APA actually also allows us to have a bullet that consists of a word or short phrase, followed by a defining or describing fragment, followed by a whole complete sentence. So that's a whole lot of information you can pack into a bullet. Again, if we are going to start with a single word or short phrase, we will begin that in lowercase. We can follow it with a colon. Then we will begin the phrase or the sentence fragment after it with a lowercase letter. And we will follow it with a period this time because it's going to be followed again by more information. So we want to make sure the reader knows where that first fragment stops. And then finally, the sentence at the end will start with a capital letter and end with a period. So let's see what happens when we do this. The three macronutrients include carbohydrates, the source of glucose. Glucose is the body's primary fuel, providing energy for all life processes. Fats, the source of essential fatty acids. Fatty acids act as energy stores and protect cell membranes. Protein, the source of essential amino acids. Amino acids help build and repair the body. So I've got quite a bit of information in my bulleted list. I have a combination of words, sentence fragments, and complete sentences, and each entry is punctuated the same way, and the elements are in the same order to make them parallel. This brings us to our learning objective 3, where we're going to talk some more about specific application. Workshop NUTR 627's Week 7 Assignment 1, Summary of Recommendations. Here is the link to the assignment. If you are working on it, you can click on this in our slide deck and it will take you right there in Canvas. And here are the assignment instructions. List the dietary recommendations from the provided list in bulleted format. The recommendations should include any numbers, percents, milligrams, micrograms, milliliters, etc., given in the book, and articles that would be your readings from the week concerning macronutrients and micronutrients, not only for the macronutrient and micronutrient categories listed in the rubric, but for the disorders and diseases stated in the rubric, and any other specific dietary recommendations. Be very specific and include all dietary recommendations in the list. Obviously, this is going to be a bulleted list because they are saying specifically that you should use a bulleted format. Here's the list of things you have to include recommendations for. It's pretty detailed. Total carbohydrates, protein, fat, vitamins and minerals, sugar and sugar substitutes, alcohol, pregnancy, lactation, sports and exercise, the elderly and long-term care, hypoglycemia, lipid disorders, hypertension, kidney disease, celiac disease, cystic fibrosis, gastropathy, bariatric surgery, insulin pump therapy, and prediabetes. And to help you understand how much to focus on each one of those, here's your scoring rubric. It looks like each bullet is really given pretty balanced attention in this rubric. You get 15 points for the macronutrients, carbohydrates, protein, and fat. You get 15 points for these micronutrients, vitamins and minerals, sugar and sugar substitutes, and alcohol. 20 points for pregnancy, lactation, sports and exercise, and elderly and long-term care. So that's four things for 20 points. That looks like 5 per point. The next one is 20 points for four more: hypoglycemia, lipid disorders, hypertension, and kidney disease. Then 20 points for four more again: celiac disease, cystic fibrosis, gastropathy, and bariatric surgery. And then 5 points each for insulin pump therapy and prediabetes for 10 points total in that criterion for a total of 10 points. So it looks like about 5 per each thing that they've listed. And there are 20 things you need to consider, so that makes sense. Now, here's an example of a list that starts to respond to this. The question is this an APA format? The answer is no, it's not an APA format. First off, APA models the use of single level lists. We would not in APA have a nested list where, for instance, carbohydrates has a bullet point next to it, and then the details for carbohydrates are nested under it with more indented bullets. That's not modeled at all in the APA manual, so we don't want to stretch guidelines and do that if we're following APA. Secondly, these list items definitely do not reflect parallel structure. The first one, 45 to 65% of total daily calories from carbohydrates, that's just a noun phrase where the percentage counts as the noun. The second one is a complete sentence, though, of the command type that we looked at earlier. Choose whole grains, vegetables, fruits, and legumes for a balanced intake. And then down in the fat, the second bullet under fat says focus on healthy fats, and then it's got the colon, monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats from sources like olive oil, nuts, and fish. So here we can consider focus on healthy fats to be a phrase followed by a sentence fragment. So it's all mixed up in here. The capitalization and punctuation are definitely not consistent or APA compliant. For instance, after the first bullet point with the percentages, there's no period under total carbohydrates. But under protein, that first bullet point, which is structured similarly to the total carbohydrates first bullet point, this one does have a period after it. So it's kind of hard to read, kind of hard to get through because it's not consistently formatted. And also the list is not double spaced, which it would be if we were writing in APA format. So let's look at an example that is APA formatted of how to create a single list that would address all of these points that you need to address in your assignment. I used all my APA guidelines that I just went over, and I came up with this. So first I have an introductory couple of statements. Dietary recommendations for macro and micronutrients vary based on age and condition. Oh, I should add that I have my title centered in bold at the top of my paper, dietary recommendations. Then I have my little introductory paragraph. So then before my list, I have the sentence, according to Green et al. 2017, general dietary recommendations include the following. Because that is a sentence by itself, I follow it with a colon before I have my list. You can see that I have also cited the textbook because maybe that's where I found all of this information. If I include this citation, if all of the information in the bullets I'm getting ready to summarize came from Green et al., then I could put Green 2017 in that sentence before the list, and then on my references page, I would have my reference for Green et al. Now, to format these bullets, I have used the fancy combination form where I start with the word, follow it with a colon. Notice that my word, total carbohydrates, starts with a lowercase t and protein starts with a lowercase p. I followed that with a colon. Then I have a sentence fragment that provides a little more information. Total carbohydrates, colon, 45 to 65% of total daily calories. Then because I'm going to follow it with a complete sentence, I put a period. Then I put my complete sentence or my command sentence, which is totally appropriate in this case because if a doctor or a nurse or some other healthcare provider were giving you a dietary recommendation, they might phrase it that way. Choose whole grains, vegetables, fruit, and legumes for a balanced intake, limiting refined sugars and simple carbohydrates. Then I ended that with a period. And then I have a similar format for parallel structure in my second bullet, which would be for protein. Protein, colon, 10 to 35% of total daily calories with a recommended intake of 8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight for average adults, period. That's still a sentence fragment. I'm still parallel. Then I have my sentence. Include lean meats, poultry, fish, beans, legumes, and plant-based sources as primary sources of protein. And again, that's that kind of command statement phrasing. It's a complete sentence and it's language that a healthcare provider might use. So that might be a good way to list your recommendations for this assignment. You may also want to ask your professor if you can modify APA guidelines and do an even simpler sort of a list. In APA, would not normally follow a heading or something like that with just a bulleted list without sentences intervening. But you may want to ask because this is asking just for a bulleted list and seems to want very simple presentation. Um, if you can do something like this with dietary recommendations centered at the top of your first page. And then each category that they're asking about listed, and then the bullets related to each category under that. So you can see in this case, though, I have made sure to apply parallel structure and to use consistent punctuation in this list, even though I'm going to ask if I can change APA guidelines to do this way. So under total carbohydrates, I have aim for 45 to 65% of total daily calories from carbohydrates with a capital A followed by a period because that is a complete sentence on its own. It's that command type of sentence that we've been talking about. And then all of my other bullets under carbohydrates and protein are listed the same way. So again, you may want to take this approach to if your professor says that you can deviate from APA, if they truly want just a very, very simple list type format for this assignment. Before we conclude, I did mention earlier that we were going to provide a formatting checklist for lists. So here is our formatting lists checklist. First, when you are choosing to use a list in APA format, make sure you have used the appropriate type of list to present the information. If it's a simple list, that should be to list related ideas in your linear text, like in your sentence, in your paragraph. If it's a lettered list, you can use that to distinguish each item in a list of related ideas in your linear text. A numbered list is to display items that must be in a numbered series. And a bulleted list is used to draw visual attention to items without implying an order. If you're using a simple list, did you separate all the items, including the last, with commas or semicolons if the list items already contain commas? And does each item reflect the same grammatical structure? For a lettered list, did you separate the items with commas or semicolons as appropriate? Did you use parallel structure? And did you format the letters in lowercase inside a pair of parentheses? For a numbered list, did you create the list using the numbering function in Word? Is each number an Arabic numeral followed by a period, like 1, period? Is each item a complete sentence that begins with a capital letter and ends with appropriate end punctuation? And for bulleted lists, we have a lot more choices, but did you create it using the bullets function in Word? Are the list items parallel? In other words, are they all complete sentences, all words or phrases of the same grammatical type, or all words plus fragments and or complete sentences? Remember, they have to be the same in each bullet. If you used full sentences, does each one begin with a capital letter and conclude with appropriate end punctuation? If it consists of simpler words or phrases, does each begin with a lowercase letter and end with no end punctuation? If you have a list of more complex words or phrases, does each begin with a lowercase letter and incorporate appropriate punctuation as though the bullets were not there? And of course, if you use the combination strategy, make sure that any full sentences begin with capital letters and end with end punctuation. Anything that's not a full sentence would still begin with a lowercase letter, and you would follow with end punctuation definitely if you were going to be continuing on with a sentence after it. So this brings us to the end of our webinar. During tonight's webinar, we used several examples to differentiate among the 4 types of lists in APA style. So many choices. We talked about best practices, or all those choices, as we say, to format bulleted lists in APA style. And we workshopped NUTR 627's Week 7 Assignment 1, the summary of recommendations. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about our online writing center before we finish up. You can check out the online writing center group in my ACU. You can watch the video linked in the second bullet for the steps to make an appointment and submit a paper. Remember that we work with you at any stage of your writing. There are 2 types of appointments listed on the schedule. You can make an email asynchronous appointment in which you upload your paper and we will send you feedback by email in 24 hours. Or you can make a Zoom appointment where you can talk live with a tutor. At the time of your appointment, you would just go to the schedule, go into the appointment, and click on the Zoom link at your appointment time. And that is in Central Time. We're all over the country at ACU, so we go by Texas time, Central Time. So if your appointment says it's at 10 a.m., that's 10 a.m. Central Time. You can also access many writing-related resources on our online writing center website. The submission process is pretty easy for your appointment. Again, you just need to schedule an appointment at WC Online. When you make the appointment, if your paper's ready, you can go ahead and upload it to the appointment form. However, keep in mind that you can make your appointments up to 2 weeks ahead of time, which means your paper may not be ready yet. And in that case, we just ask that you return to the appointment at least a minute or so before your appointment time, or the system will lock you out, and upload your paper before that. If you're going to make a Zoom appointment, it helps if you upload any paper that you intend to bring, an hour or 2 beforehand, because that will give the tutor some time to look at it before they meet with you. You can contact us at Online Writing Center at acu.edu if you have a simple question. How do I cite this? Did I format? Is this list in parallel structure, etc.? You can just email us that question at our central email address and a tutor will pretty quickly respond. If you do have a more complex question and need to schedule an appointment, you can click on the link in the second, I don't know what that shape is, the second row. Or you can visit the Online Writing Center website to find a range of resources, which include our APA course paper template, which has all the APA settings set into it. We have a YouTube channel with a lot of different webinars featured, and we have our Online Writing Center blog, in which tutors share interesting insights regarding the writing process. We have a new series on using AI and citing AI responsibly in your work, so you may want to check out the blog. We also have other webinars linked on our website and through our YouTube channel. If you're interested in lists, you may want to check out our list and table formatting in APA style webinar that we did earlier in the term. Obviously, in addition to discussing lists, that one talks about table formatting, and it has a checklist for table formatting in it, so you may want to check that out. And if you need help with APA in general, these are the links to our most recent Intro to APA 7th edition webinar. Again, if you go to the slide decks for those, then the resources in those slide decks, you can get to those links by clicking on as well. And this concludes our webinar on creating the easy to read list. I hope you enjoyed learning about all the different choices we have. When we're creating lists in APA format, I had a really good time putting the slideshow together because I just find APA fascinating in general, and all the guidelines for lists, it's like a puzzle challenge. How can you best use it to fit your communication needs? I appreciate your learning with us today, and we look forward to your visiting us at the Online Writing Center. Bye.